welcome to today's webinar on HR legislation updates for 2025. My name is Christelle Rinn and I'm the CEO here at HR Locker. I can't believe it's almost the end of January. We're on the last week, so we've made it through. So today I'm delighted to have Fredericka Sheppard with me from Voltedge HR, who will be going through I suppose the updates for 2025, things that have come in and things that are coming in as well. As always, we have a questions and answers section, and I have Nikki with me today who will send the questions on. So we'll be going through a number of topics. So if you have any questions throughout, just pop a question into the questions and answers section, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. This will be recorded, so if you need to leave early or if you want to share it with somebody, it will be emailed to you tomorrow morning or at the end of today, but tomorrow at the latest, so you'll get a copy of the email and the slides, the video and the slides, and so you can watch it back or share it. So Fredericka, thank you so much for being with us today.
Very well. Good. Thanks so much for having me, Christelle. And of course, delighted as always to join Christelle and Nikki and the HR Locker team and to be here with you this morning as we talk about the updates for 2025 when it comes to HR and employment law. And we have another busy year ahead. So lots of changes in the last couple of years and obviously more to come. So I'm just going to quickly run through what we'll talk about this morning. And as Christelle was saying, any of the questions as we go through this, please do pop them into the Q&A and we will make time afterwards to cover them. And if we don't get to all your questions, because I know there is a huge number of registrations, we will obviously be able to follow up potentially afterwards with you. But you'll get this recording. So sit back, enjoy your coffee and come on the journey with us this morning. So we're going to be talking about the delightful HR and employment law changes around auto-enrolment. I'm sure you're probably tired of hearing about it, but we'll give you a quick overview on it. We'll talk about the new the EU AI Act, which I think is really important, and just understand from your point of view what's important for you and as an employer. Gender pay gap reporting is there very much with us, an annual event, and so we'll talk on that. Minimum wage, always important, I think, to realize that the minimum wage is moving all of the time. And obviously the importance of staying compliant and up to date with that. Good to talk about the small benefit scheme because that was changed recently as well. And so again, an important one for you to know. And of course, statutory sick pay, which I think is really topical. Then if that's not enough, we'll also get into the whole area of flexible working, remote working, some changes around maternity leave, parents' leave, critical skills. We probably could be here all morning, but we will try and keep it concise enough. There's lots of really valuable information out there. The Workplace Relations have a fantastic site, wonderful resources. So any of the topics we covered today that you need additional information on, they would be a really good site to go to. And obviously ourselves, we have a lot on our own website. And of course, we link that to the HR Locker team as well. So let's get into auto-enrolment. So, it's been pushed out a few times, but we believe now the launch is going to be it's the end of September. So it is fast approaching. We're already, as Christelle said, almost at the end of January. So, so you probably know all of the eligibility and just how it works. And so I guess for you to know, the mechanics of it, I think, is the part that's probably going to be really challenging for employers. And there is, that administrative overhead. And a lot of what we talk about this morning is around reporting requirements. So the administrative overhead is definitely something that's more pronounced for employers as a result of not only our national legislation, but obviously EU legislation. So the Auto-Enrolment Retirement Savings Scheme is going to be called, it's going to be a fund that is called My Future Fund. So again, that's where all of the pension funds associated with this auto-enrolment will be held. And there is a new authority set up, and there's a bit of a mouthful now, so bear with me. It is the National Automatic Enrolment Retirement Savings Authority. So they will be given the responsibility to oversee, obviously, the administration of it, and it will be supervised by the pension authority. So you can be sure that it will be well structured, ethical, good governance, and all of the necessary reporting. And of course, the auto-enrollment, the scheme sits within the Act from 2024. So, all of the necessary activities will be happening, and they will be reporting on it, I'm quite sure. So that's, I guess, to just give you some context around it. The part that I think is kind of interesting is the contributions and understanding, certainly from year one. So obviously it's starting at 1.5% of salary will be what the employee contributes, and it'll be automatic. So the employee will automatically join, and this will be picked up through revenue from payroll data, So, if you already have obviously a pension scheme, then you don't have to auto-enroll. The employer will also be giving 1.5%, and then the government is giving €1 for every 3. So I remember somebody asking me about this before. So at the moment, if we are making a pension contribution ourselves, that we can make that pension contribution from our gross salary. So actually that is equivalent to this, in the sense that the government aren't handing you the money. They're actually allowing you take the contribution that you're making from your gross salary. So they are not taking, obviously, a tax on it. So that's the employer piece. So just to know where it fits and how you get access to the employer piece, I think that's kind of interesting. And then year one, obviously, these are the rates, but it will increase. And so the most important thing, I think, for employers is to be ready for this, to have set expectations with staff, to know how it's going to work for you. That administrative piece, making sure you're talking to your payroll provider and that everything is set up to automate this. If you decide that, look, maybe we should think about having a pension plan that gives us a little bit more flexibility in how it's managed, then you would need to actually set that up before, obviously, the auto-enrollment. Because if it's not set up at that point, then staff will automatically go into the auto-enrollment thing. And so there's a lot of pension providers and brokers at the moment giving great advice on how to manage this, but also potentially how to set up your own pension scheme or to contribute to your PRSA, and then your employer contributes as well. So there's a lot of information out there. The important thing is, I guess, from a budgeting point of view, to know that there is a cost, there is an administrative piece. And so somebody will have to do that work. So when you're thinking about it across your team, look at who's going to take responsibility for this, and who is interfacing with payroll and getting the necessary reports. So that's auto-enrollment. So we'll move on to the next topic we want to talk to you about, is the new EU AI Act. So again, this is still very, very new, and I think you're probably all coming up to speed on it. It'll be mandatory from February to make sure that you have trained your employees on the new AI system. But I think you're probably, like me, finding that everything you're using now, you have an AI option. You go into Google, so you have an AI option. You do search on a search engine. Across Teams, Zoom, everything is giving you an AI support, and they are absolutely remarkable. We use them across our business. They bring great efficiencies, and I suppose the big thing for employers is to actually look at how can you start using more of the AI tools that are there to bring value to what it is you do. And I think that the report that came out, was it last week or at the weekend, that Irish companies have been very slow to adapt to some of the AI tools. And I think a lot of that is probably because we're not 100% sure how to use them or what the expectation is. But this new act now is going to actually propel us forward a little bit. So we will need to make a decision on a particular tool that you're going to use within your organization. And that is considered really good practice, because it means, say, for example, if you're a Google house or if you're a Microsoft house, they all have their own built-in AI systems that you can actually start to use, and it's well integrated, and it means that every employee has access to the same tools, rather than having individuals using different tools, because obviously each tool is going to be different. So the recommendation very much is, from an employer's point of view, to make sure that you are all using the one tool within your organization. You also need to train your employees on how to do it. And so then there is this kind of classification about the level of risk. Is it an unacceptable? Is it high? Is it low? They're all going to fit with it. It's all part of the legislation, but it all fits within how you want to manage your business, because this is a real valuable source of data, of information, and you want to make sure that when you are using it and your employees are using it, that they're using it correctly. I would say AI is wonderful, but EI remains incredibly important. That's the emotional intelligence and the human contact. So no matter what we do with AI, I think we need to make sure we proof it. All right. And we need to make sure that it's in our language as well, in the sense of how we would communicate. So, you see people using it obviously across academia, but you see it across recruitment, doing job descriptions, job applications. And it's interesting, just coming through job applications, people who send through their application that's AI generated and they haven't proofed it. So again, these are little areas where we can really maybe find out a little bit more about the candidate as well. So AI, wonderful tool, wonderful technology, so much to gain from it. We just need to make sure we're using it, managing it, and implementing it in all the right ways. And this new EI Act, I think, is going to give us some good guidance on that.
I think as well, Fredericka, so important that companies, I suppose, acknowledge that employees are using it. So you can't ignore it. So at least decide which one you're going to use as a company, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you're looking at good governance and good compliance across so many other areas within your business. Well, this is another one of the streams that you need to pay attention to, put it on your list, and acknowledge that it is there, people are using it, but channel it in the right direction. And a single source, I think, for you as an organization is the right thing.
Fredericka, I'm just going to go back to just two questions here on the pension side, if that's okay. Is so can you clarify that the contribution is based on net or gross pay?
It's gross pay. So the thing is, so that's where you get the tax value from the government. So your contribution is going to come out of gross.
Yeah, and I've actually had this question a couple of times. If your company pension plan does not kick in until you've passed your probation period after 6 months, do you have to auto-enroll for those first 6 months?
Yeah, so this is I think where all of us are going to be reviewing what our pension regulations and pension plans, how they're set up. And we saw a little bit of this when, the sick leave came in, and the first cases going through where employees felt that they were disadvantaged, but actually the plan that the employer had was more advantageous. So I think we're going to learn more between now and September on some of these areas, and it also gives us enough time to start looking at what do we need to do maybe with our existing pension plan to make sure we're compliant. Because remember, revenue is going to automatically enroll people. And I think you can only auto-enroll yourself twice over that period. So I think, just get your policy set up, get your enrollment set up, especially if you have a company pension that is more valuable and is more generous than actually just what's required of you in the auto-enrollment. Make sure you have that set up that's compliant.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing, Fredericka, isn't it? That this is not, you're not going to push the button for it to come out of payroll. Revenue are going to be managing that. So if somebody has started on day one, they're not paying a pension, regardless of if you have your policy is to pay pension after 6 months, they're taking that 1.5%.
Well, the revenue is going to, it's going to be generated from your payroll files that revenue have access to. So
is there a cap on government contribution? So as I know right now, there will be capped at the 1.5, right?
Yeah, no, well, it's between
the one.
I think it's one and is it 1 and 3? So there will be a cap, obviously, but again, depending on how much you're putting in, remember the government contribution is really coming from your tax. So right now, even without having auto-enrolment, if we were just to have a pension contribution going in through a PRSA, we will have, depending on our age, we will have certain limits on how much we can contribute, but that is going in as gross. So we actually are kind of getting that contribution from the government right now. What auto-enrolment really is doing, making sure everybody has one. That's what the drive is, and make sure employers are contributing to it, you know? Yeah.
And I think this is kind of one of the same questions. Is our policy is that, employees can't join pension till 1 year after full employment. Well, I have to change the handbook and contract along with employees. So presumably, yes.
Yeah. So now's the time to get all of that under review and to look at what you're offering, make sure you're compliant with, because as we said, you know, revenue are not going to be able to come and approach all of you, and they're not asking you to submit details about your company pension plan. What they're expecting is that they will start to see employee and employer pension contributions happening through payroll. You know,
will the government pension contribution have to be disclosed in the employee's payslip? I presume your payroll provider will put it down
just
there.
remember what the government is doing is it's taking it from gross. All right. And that money is going into a fund. So you'll probably see on your payslip pension, auto-enrolment, or whatever it is, just like you would do right now. Like if you were doing an ABC or if you were doing a pension, you would see it on your payslip right now, and it would come off your gross.
Yeah, I think that.
So I think
as well, the employee will have their own access to their own portal.
Yeah,
to see
you'll get your own login.
Yeah,
absolutely. So you'll be able to do that under a MyGov account. But again, open the conversations with your payroll providers. If you don't have your own in-house payroll and you're it's an outsourced, they're going to be working to make sure all of this is set up and that the payroll systems can accommodate the auto-enrolment. Yeah.
If you're over 60, can you enroll? And does the government contribute?
So right now they're saying that it's between the ages of 23 and 60. All right. And if you, so that's right now what the guide is. Obviously, if that might change when we get into this and when it starts to evolve, and when, because they don't want to obviously discriminate against anybody. But remember, you still are going to have eligibility to your state pension as well when you get to that point. And of course, retirement age is 66. Okay. But you can still have a pension if you are now 60, or if you're 61 in September and the category here is between 23 and 60, you can still have a PRSA. So there's PRSA still available that you can actually go and have your own personal retirement savings account. And you can contribute, and your employer can contribute to that as well. It's just the employer, because right now that the employer is supposed to facilitate that deduction through payroll, but the employer doesn't have to contribute to it. Okay, but obviously from September, they're going to need to do the contribution through auto-enrolment or something else that you have in place. So these are all really good questions to have with your conversations, to have with your employer, with your payroll provider. And reach out to some of the pension brokers, because you know they are very well informed on this process. There has been a bit of a stop-start. A lot of the details are being finalized and matured. Maybe some of your questions cannot be answered just yet. But you know, if they're important questions, I would say definitely go to a pension expert. Make sure you're satisfied that you know what position you're in as the employer, but also you might have some employees who have special circumstances and you want to make sure that they're taken care of, you know.
I'm going to take this one, Fredericka, and I wonder you're going to answer the same as me. As auto-enrolment has been deferred before, are we sure it will go ahead in September? And my answer would be I wouldn't put my house on it, but right now it's September.
September. I would say, look, you know, we know that there's a lot of governmental changes happening and people settling into new ministerial positions and all of that. I think there is a desire to meet this target before the end of the year for sure. So the expectation is, I'd say the government will not want to defer this again. Now, there is a bit of pushback, and we'll talk a little bit about it when we come into the minimum wage. You know, employers are concerned about the increased costs in doing business. And so we have all these different regulatory and reporting aspects that we need to meet, and they all have to be resourced. So that's a cost to the employer. This is a cost to the employer. Sick leave is a cost to the employer. So, you know, and we are going to talk about sick leave. So, at the moment, the Sick Leave Act has been paused, and there's no further sick leave being paid other than the 5 days per over a 12-month period. So that is, again, the ESRI are reviewing that to kind of assess actually the cost and the burden on companies and employers and businesses generally. But I think, to be honest, the auto-enrolment, I think it will go ahead, because the big issue there is we need people to be saving for their future and for their retirement. And while there is a cost to the employer, I think the government will probably go ahead with it. Yeah, I'd be surprised if it doesn't happen in 2025.
Me too. Okay, so I know there's a number of questions there, but we're just going to go on to the next section, and we'll still get back to those questions towards the end.
Great. Yeah. So gender pay reporting, my goodness, it's been around for a while. It's been in the UK. Some of you here today might already be doing this in the UK. Right now, for 2024, it is for employers who have 50 plus employees. So the reporting, so the way it works is you take a date, and they suggest in June, where you actually gather all of the data on your pay for your staff. And so I guess the gender pay piece, it's important to recognize that it's not equal pay. All right. So it is the difference in the average hourly rate between a man in your company, in your workplace, and a woman in your workplace. So it is an important piece of data to gather. Does it inform, does it, make a huge difference to diversity, inclusion, equality? Well, it's a step forward, and any country who has introduced this would say it is a step forward because it brings greater realization. But for example, if you had an organization where all the senior team or most of the senior team were female, and there were men in the organization, it could be 50-50 ratio of men to women, but the men in the organization are not in senior leadership roles, then the gender pay reporting is going to be skewed towards women. All right. So right now, I would say in most situations, there is a gender pay gap. And a lot of that is because, more senior positions or higher paid roles tend to be a higher percentage of men. And we know there's a lot of reasons for that. There's societal reason, there's employment reasons, there's family reasons, there's equality reasons. But this is, as I say, it's not equal pay. It's a gender pay reporting to see where are you in your organization when it comes to the pay that women get on average and the pay that men get. So there's a very structured way that you are asked to report this, and then you are asked to develop that report, analyze the gap, give some sort of narrative around why you believe that gap is there, initiatives perhaps that you might be planning to do or introduce to close the gap, and you're expected then to publish it on your website. Okay, and you're supposed to publish it on the website by the end of the year. So you take a date in June where you gather all your data, and that's kind of common practice. That's the expectation. And then between that date and the reporting date at the end of the year, you actually develop out your report, the format, the rationale, the analysis on it. What does this mean for us as an organization? How do we compare to other organizations? And the intention is that all companies will be publishing their gender pay gap report. Now, there's some very good companies who have done remarkable, and you will have seen this recently across the media. On Post have no gender pay gap. So that means they've been working hard on a number of initiatives for an extended period of time to get that type of an outcome. All right, so they must have great diversity across their organization in lots of different roles. But just because there is a gap, you have to analyze it and you have to understand what that means as well. But it is, I guess, a step forward in putting the spotlight on the whole area of pay and diversity within the workplace, especially from an equality point of view, access to opportunities for promotion and progression and things like that.
I think the key, we spoke about this earlier, Fredericka, is most companies will have some kind of gender pay gap, and it's the narrative around it that's so important, and it's the plan that you're having around it. You're not going to be, hummed and quartered because you have a gender pay gap. The majority of companies do have one. It's just the world we live in. So it's the narrative that's important.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I think, hopefully most companies have started the process and completed it for the end of the year, but that's not, we know that not everybody will have got there because, as I say, there is an administrative burden in all of this as well, and businesses may not have had the opportunity to do it. So if you're still struggling with it, if this is on your agenda and it's one of your deadlines that you're trying to meet, just reach out and look at some of the other websites, and look at the types of reports that others have generated. If you're struggling to try and format it and gather it, and obviously it has to be your data that you put in, but there's a lot of learning, I think, from the work that others have done. And there's obviously consultants and supports available, especially if you have a high number of employees. It might be something that's very difficult for you to do directly yourself. I know we have some projects currently where we're trying to help clients close off that reporting piece because of that deadline piece. But again, I'd say, look, there's fantastic reports out there. Look at the website. Sometimes it's kind of hard to find them on some of the websites. But I think all of the very well-established organizations will have them there, and they will be actually very much supporting the work they put into this whole area.
Yeah, I would concur. The on-post one is really good. I just have two questions here, and then we'll move on to the next bit. Gender pay gap. Does this mean a male versus a female doing different roles and who may have different qualifications?
Yeah, so it actually doesn't take any of those things into account. It only takes gender. All right. So it just looks at it from a male point of view and a female point of view. So it doesn't take anything around the role you have, how long you're in the company, what your qualifications are, worked full-time, part-time. So it just gets the average, the hourly average, okay, of the person, whether you're female or you're male. So that's why it's not able to say whether there's equal pay in the organization. It's actually just measuring what is the gap between what our men are paid and what our women are paid. Okay.
I'm actually going to put this question together because I think it's kind of the same, is where does the gender pay gap reporting actually go? And if there's no gender pay gap, do we need to report it? And is this regulated under the WRC?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. Yeah, really interesting question. So the thing is, it goes on your website. So there is a requirement for you to report it on your website. Right now, you don't have to submit it anywhere, in the sense of there's no WRC authority, somebody in there gathering all the gender pay reports from companies all over the country. Not right now anyway. So the thing is, you're expected to do it. If you have 50 plus employees, you now fall within the bracket where you're required to do it. And the reporting is that you report it on your website. So you can actually see why there might potentially be a lot of companies who haven't got there yet. And there's no, authority potentially going to come knocking on the door right now. But the expectation is that you would have it. And remember, again, just from another angle on this, if you're going out to the market, if you have staff and they know that there's over 50 employees and you should have a gender pay report already published on your website and you don't do it, is it because you don't bother doing it, you haven't the time, or is it because you're concerned about the gap and you can't explain it? So, your employer brand is important in all of this, not only with your staff, but also how you're positioned in the market and how you attract others. I think candidates are going to get a lot more, active on this. I think they're going to be proactively checking companies that they're going to apply to for jobs. They're going to actually be looking at, well, what is their gender pay gap? Again, it's in its as a report, it only measures one thing really, but it does give an insight into the organization all the same. And I think it's around the narrative that's really interesting. And I think that's where, you know, any employers here today, have a look at what some good narrative looks like and how well it reads, and just leverage the work that others may have done to help inform and help you put together that.
Yeah, I'd agree. And then I'm just going to take this one before we go. What about transgender employees for gender equality? This has come up a number of times for ourselves in HR Locker, because we produce the gender pay gap from the system and we don't, it's just male and female. So at the moment, Fredericka, correct me, is that the legislation is male and female. So until that changes in the report, it's only measuring male and female.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So it doesn't capture anything else.
Yeah, and that's just what the legislation is under for the moment.
Yeah. So the other thing I was just going to talk there about minimum wage, and look, we know that January is usually the month where minimum wage gets reviewed, but just thought it would be kind of interesting that, you know, when you look at the pay, like over the last 10 years, minimum wage pay, in 2015, the minimum wage was €8.65. So it has increased by over 60% during that time. Now, you know, again, sometimes you'll hear employers, especially employers who have a group of staff who are on the minimum wage, where they say that actually this increase every time in the minimum wage is putting a significant burden on the business. Look, it's legislation, they have to do it. Some employers who might have that a group of employees who are paid just above the minimum wage, well, every time the minimum wage increases, they have to increase that as well, because they're trying to stay ahead of it. So the cost continues to rumble on every year. And I think that's where, you know, evaluating all of these different measures, I think it's not I don't believe any employer doesn't want to pay staff well. It's affordability.
Yeah, I agree.
And so that's where, you know, all of the different layers that are coming in from a statutory and reporting point of view, the employer is paying for those every time. And it is about trying to create good environments, good conditions. But I think, you know, that's why the government, I think, have maybe just decided to look at the sick leave piece. And you know, we talked a little bit about that on the auto-enrolment, you know, but I think the auto-enrolment is a bigger piece, and I think it'll go ahead. It's beyond just a cost to the employer.
Just one quick question. This one is, do you have to give an employee a new contract every time you update their pay?
No, you don't have to. You can just issue an addendum, or you can just issue them with notification that their minimum wage is now X. You know, just good to make sure you have a record of it, that you have fulfilled your obligation as an employer. And remember, this should also be very transparent when it comes to pay slips. Okay, this is information that you would need to have on your pay slips, obviously what employees are being paid and the hours they've been paid for. Yeah.
Okay.
So, small benefit exemptions. Yeah, so look, this voucher scheme has been around for quite a while. It used to be, I think once upon a time, did it go below 500? I think it might have been 250 at one point. I'm showing my age now, but it went all the way up 500,000, and now from January this year, it's going to be 1,500. And I think it is a very valuable tax incentive or tax-free way of recognizing staff. And I think an awful lot of employers use it, even if it is €50 or €100 or whatever. But the fact that you could go all the way up to 1,500 is really good, because obviously that's tax-free. The big thing is that you cannot use this scheme to pay people's salary. This is not about paying people for the work they do. This is a benefit. So it's like a bonus, it's an added thing. And so I think that's where it would be very important to make sure that if if an employee does overtime, or if an employee is on a call and there's an allowance that they're supposed to get, well, you can't use this scheme to pay for those sort of things. Those sort of on-call allowance or overtime, they all have to be paid through payroll. So it's important just to know that. And obviously then I just thought the enhanced reporting piece, it's no harm to be reminded of that, because again, all of these things go to revenue, and revenue, as we know, are very efficient, very intelligent, have fantastic systems. They probably know more about any of us than we know about ourselves. They are joining up the dots. So anything that you give an employee, revenue want to know about it, whether it's a benefit, a tax incentive benefit or not, they still want to know about it. So again, there's a layer of reporting that's required. So again, that falls to the employer. Okay.
And is this done through payroll or through your payroll provider or through Ross?
Yeah. So well, it depends. Usually your payroll provider will be looking after your Ross account. So that's where it would be done generally. Yeah. But obviously the payment of these schemes are usually done through vouchers or cards or whatever. There's lots of really good Irish companies that have good offerings in this space, but there is a fee as well. So the employer, again, when you buy it, there's a fee usually with the card that you pay.
Yeah.
And then look, different providers obviously have their different terms and conditions, but if you activate it and you don't use it, sometimes there is that you're losing a percentage. I'm not sure what all the details are, but different companies have different offerings. So just if you have vouchers sitting there or gift cards sitting there and you haven't used them but you've activated them, well, they might be losing money for you, so go and treat yourself. Okay.
Yes, 100%. So I'm just going to take two questions from here because I'm just conscious of time. If a bonus is mentioned in the contract, can the small benefit exemption scheme be used to pay it? No, it can't. Yeah, that's a contractual obligation that the employer has made to you, and that bonus has to be paid through payroll. Okay. The remote working allowance, is this on top of wages? So the €3.20? Yeah. So it's separate. Okay. Yeah. And I think I had thought, no, I'll just take one more. I had thought it was just a once-off tax-free gift. Has this changed? Yes, it has. Yeah. So now it has become just a little bit more. And again, I think it's probably to accommodate an opportunity for employers to, have a level of discretionary reward and recognition for staff. Yeah. Yeah, and I like it. We use the credit cards now for people. Yeah, it means lots of options for people. It's nice. Yeah, so you can obviously make your purchases in person, but also online. And obviously, a lot of this is really good encryption as well, so the payments are secure. So we talked a little bit about this already. Yeah, statutory sick pay. So look, I think, we're in that kind of holding place right now. I think everybody with us today, it will be a good idea for you to keep an eye on this, because it probably will change, or there might very well be a decision around it. But right now, the maximum number of statutory sick pay days that you as an employer are required to pay an employee is for 5 days in a 12-month period, and that is certified sick leave. It's not unpaid. So and the other thing just to say as well, we now have more case law on this. So that if you even just go into the WRC website, you'll be able to see different cases that have come up where employees have submitted a case around the payment of statutory sick pay, either because they felt that they didn't get their full entitlement, or they felt that the company policy disadvantaged them in some way. And I suppose the main thing that came out of one of the first or second cases was that if the employer's sick pay scheme is more generous than the statutory sick pay scheme, then the view from the WRC is that the employee is not disadvantaged, even though, when you get that pay might be different to what you expect. All right. So again, some really good case law there, and I would encourage our joiners today to take a look at some of the cases on the WRC website. Great. Right to request. I think we're waiting for this for a long time, and it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. I think if we were sitting here in 12 months' time, we'd be still talking about this. So there's two different things here, and you will all know that there is a code of practice around the right to request remote, but there's also a code of practice around flexible working.
the right to request remote work is really under the spotlight right now. And again, we're hearing a lot of well-established, strong brands talking about flexible work, hybrid working, remote working, and how they want to bring their staff back to the office. There's quite a force driving this agenda forward, and I think it'll be very interesting to see where it lands. Personally, I think hybrid working is here to stay. I think there's an expectation from employees, whether you're a manager or an individual, that hybrid, there's a lot of advantages to it, but there is still a lot of challenges with it. And there's no doubt the in-person conversation, the relationship you build with a fellow colleague when you're in person is wonderful. And, the extent of that virtual relationship just is more challenging. But I think, there's so many ways that companies have been creative around this. There's some really good advice from organizations on remote working, about meetups and not always having to go to the office, but actually having different locations where people come together. We're human. I think we need human contact. Yes, some of us are individual contributors. Some of us really thrive in a team environment. And, there's a bit of socializing in this as well. So, we have a population who have been really restricted in the whole aspect of the social aspect of work. And so, I think employers are really trying to navigate an awful lot of various different aspects, because the world of work continues to change, continues to present challenges and expectations from employees and companies that you're trying to juggle. And of course, for my fellow HR professionals today, we're very often the architects trying to develop out the program, the initiative, the model, the methodology, the policy to meet the company's expectations and the employees' needs. And that is hard. And but I guess the important thing is opening dialogue with your staff. Your people are your greatest asset, and you want to keep your best talent. You want to attract the best talent. So I think it is important to understand what it is that people need. Yeah. And I think I mentioned earlier when I was talking to you that there is this new term called micro retirement, which Gen Z and millennials are really leaning into. So we have lots of different terms that have come up about, the quiet quitting and various different things like that. Well, micro retirement is a desire for greater work-life balance, and it's kind of similar to a sabbatical. So it's just termed more groovy and cooler. So
totally, I'm signing up for that, Fredericka.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, the idea that we all have to come to the office and be in the office 5 days a week for full days, that work-life balance piece is challenging, even in hybrid, even in remote, because sometimes, we're really bad at switching off. We've our computer on all the time, or we feel we're on all the time. And there's lots of different guides, best practice, protocols, codes of practice, legislation around the right to disconnect, all of those things. But it comes back to our own practices and actually self-management and what our employer, what our manager or supervisor expects from us. So I would really encourage employers to open the dialogue with their employees, with their staff, to understand what it is going to work for them, understand what it is going to work for the employer, and then try and, carve a policy and a model that and keep it under review. The cases we're seeing coming in front of the WRC in relation to this whole area is interesting, because I think some people brought forward cases where they felt that the decision by the employer not to grant the request to remote work was unfair or not reasonable. The role of the WRC with relation to this code is not to assess whether the decision of the employer was right or wrong. It's actually to make sure that the employer followed the process. and that they evaluated your application and reached a decision on merit. So again, I think we have a kind of a flurry of cases coming through, and that seems to be the consistent approach that the WRC adjudicating officers are taking on this.
Yeah, it does seem to be kind of very practical. It's not that that they're pushing the agenda that they should be giving flexible or remote. It's really that you followed the request process within the 8 weeks and you've given the response time, right?
Yeah, that the employer is honouring the code of practice that is there and they're expected to do. So that's, again, just making sure you're staying true to that and that you have that mechanism set up. The flexible working piece now is obviously a piece of legislation that came in under the Work-Life Balance and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 2023, and that is around providing flexibility for parents or somebody acting on behalf of a parent for a child under 12 or under 16 if there is a long-term illness or if they have a form of disability. So it is around the caring aspect and providing that personal care. It's interesting because there's, employers could look for information, medical certs or, copies of dates of birth and things like that. So I think this is kind of interesting in relation to GDPR and just how much information one should provide on matters like this. But look, it is a facility that's there available to people, flexible working, and I'm sure that there will be good governance and good record keeping around personal details like that.
I couldn't agree with you more with this side of things. It's really about communication and opening a dialogue. You want people to stay, and if somebody has, for example, a child at home with a disability or a long-term illness, you should probably be having those conversations anyway to see how you can support that employee to stay in the workforce.
I think
just
so.
Have 2 quick questions, then we're going to move on. If the employer advertises the role as a full on-site role and hires the staff who agrees to join the on-site role, can they then ask for remote and flexible work?
They can ask for it, because that's the right. So the Code of Practice says anybody can ask for your role to be considered for remote or hybrid, but it doesn't mean the employer has to approve it. You just have to justify why it is not going to work for you. So you need to take into your own needs as a business. You need to take the needs and the reasons for the request, and then make sure you're staying true to the WRC Code of Practice.
Mm-hmm.
That's your responsibility.
Does an employee returning from maternity leave have the right to request flexible working?
An employee is an employee.
Anytime, yeah. And does flexible working mean reduced hours or just different hours?
So it depends on what that flexibility is, So again, there is provision there for it to be, it could mean working core hours, or it could mean starting early, finishing late. It could mean anything. So it's flexible working. And again, which I think makes more sense, because remember, the whole point of this is to support an employee who is in a position where there are some caring responsibilities that they need to attend to. Yeah.
There's actually a question here that says, can you give me an example of flexible hours? And I suppose even just in my own cases, I have to drop my children to school for 9 o'clock. We have a start time for 9 o'clock. So I start from 9:30 and finish half an hour later. And that's just a flexible working arrangement that I have with a number of people who work with us. And it so sometimes it doesn't have to be that dramatic that you're working every second Thursday or anything like that. Sometimes it can just be a 15-minute workaround.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be reduced hours. It could be some form of a flexible regime. It could be your pattern of, maybe greater number of days remote versus on site or whatever. So it could be anything. Yeah. So it's really quite a multitude. Yeah.
Maternity leave, some changes.
Yeah, some changes. So this is, I think, a really good development where it really supports the pregnant employee at times that are very challenging and difficult. And it is the fact now that you could actually pause your maternity leave if you're out on sick leave. And we know that there are, maternity could be a time of great vulnerability for the employee's health. There could be lots of different complications. It could be underlying condition. So I think this is really helpful for employees now to have this ability where they can have they can pause their maternity leave, that's the first thing, but also they can take this time off work until they have recovered, and it doesn't matter how long you've been working with the employer. So again, this is all protected leave.
Yeah, which is great. Okay. Parents' leave. I always get mixed up between parents and parental leave, and
I know there's a long list of similar names for some of these leaves. We put together a table setting out the whole thing of who was it for, which parent, what was it statutory, was it paid, was it unpaid? Because it is really confusing. A lot of them are kind of similar terms. So this is where each parent is entitled to take 9 weeks leave during the first 2 years of the child's life. So again, really good practices, and it's both parents. So it's not hopefully feeding into that gender pay issue, but actually encouraging both parents to be able to be in a position where they can use this provision, which is really great. And obviously the benefit then is increased to the 9 weeks as well.
Critical skills.
Yeah, so this again is one to keep an eye on. There's some changes around the whole permits, work visas, and one of the changes is around the salary threshold. So if your business is in the space where you are actually looking at critical skills or work permits, this probably is of interest to you. So the other thing is to register yourself as a trusted partner if you can with the department, because that helps you speed up your application process. So that's a really good thing to do. So that means the application process will be shortened. So there's lots of kind of technical pieces in here which you can read yourself at your leisure, but the big thing is just some particular changes. So there's 2 new types of permits. This is around the seasonal employment permit, and then there is the dependent and partner permit. The other thing is the salary cap, or that level of salary that is required for the critical skills permit or just a regular permit. That too has changed. So that has increased the level, and so I think that is more demanding for employers to meet that threshold. So again, let's see what's happening. This is what's in place right now. I think there definitely seems to be very strong commitment from the department and from government generally to keep this mechanism and this process under review to ensure that the labour market is not negatively impacted by a very challenging work permit visa process. So there's specific things in here, I think, that depending on if this is relevant for you, that I think you will find interesting, even around what happens if you have somebody on a work permit and they're made redundant. Again, keeping communication channels open with the department to make sure they're notified of that, then the individual will not be adversely impacted. They will have a window of opportunity where they can go and find another job. So things like that, I think, are really important, just to understand your role as the employer in order to support the employee, that they are here and they have the right working permits to be in the country as well as to be employed.
Yeah, I think it's just something, like I said, to be really just conscious of. Fredericka, we've 6 minutes before 12 o'clock, so I'm going to do a quick fire rapid round because there's so many questions and I want to get to as many as possible.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, here we go. Ready. So does the person, so this is in regards to flexible working, does the employee who's providing care have to live with the same household? So for example,
Yes.
if we have an elderly parent.
Yeah. So living in the same household, that's a requirement. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Can you be denied the additional 16 weeks unpaid maternity leave?
Can you be denied it?
Yes.
Well, it is protected leave. It is a statutory provision. If your employer says that they cannot approve it, they would have to have a very justifiable reason for not being able to approve it.
Okay, so no, really. Okay. Any legal requirements under the production of sick certs and reason? What if an employee refuses to certify or see occupational health?
Okay, so it's certified sick leave. So as an employer, you are required to provide statutory sick pay to an individual who is certified sick. If they haven't gone to their practitioner, if they're not certified sick, then there isn't an obligation on you to pay it. So you may not have a policy where you have paid unpaid leave. So
yeah. Can a company ring up the doctor to clarify the sick note is legitimate?
There's a tricky one. I would say, see how you get on with that. Yeah.
I had one recently.
Patient doctor confidentiality. Remember, yeah. And if something is produced by a doctor, whether you agree with it or not, a medical practitioner has certified somebody. So I think.
I had a company recently ask could they didn't accept online company doctors online, certs from company doctors online. I was like, I'm not sure you can do that because they're certified doctors.
Well, if it is, it is,
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, so would you not include a trans person in the gender pay gap report?
You're not required to. That's it, yeah.
Exactly. And I think, because we had this discussion before, is that I suppose I do think the world is changing. This gender pay gap report is purely just aimed at male and female. It might change in years' time, but at the moment that's what the report is about. Maybe you can put something in the narrative, but right now it's not a requirement.
It's not a requirement right now, but look, I think it is a space. It's a starting point to actually capture something on the whole area of pay and equality. Yeah.
Is the remote working allowance mandatory or a benefit?
It's not mandatory.
Regarding and also just to clarify with the remote working allowance, correct. So yes, the company can do the €3.20. The employee, if you're not doing the €3.20, can claim their remote working tax allowance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Regarding the reporting of gifts, do you have to report those under the €1,500 cap?
Yeah. So any benefit that you get, you have to report it. So that's the thing. So you have to receipt everything. So right now, even in expenses, we have to receipt everything and upload them. So it has to be all transparent. So if you gift your employees, remember this is only for employees, it's not for contractors.
Yes.
That's an important piece as well. You might have contractors with long-serving relationships, but I'm afraid this does not fit within that relationship. So if you're gifting a €1,500 voucher to an employee, you're just required to report it. So remember, you're going to have to account for it somewhere in your accounts. Yeah.
Has everyone's salary changed in January? No, everyone's salary changed in January because of minimum wage. As everyone's salary changed in January because of the minimum wage increase, do I need to send everyone an addendum, or can I just do a company update?
So, you could do a company update, I suppose. The thing is, you want to, you could, I don't think you need to probably do a notice for everybody. It will be recorded on their payslip. So you want to show evidence, okay? You want to make sure that there's documented evidence. The thing is that it is the minimum pay, people who are on minimum pay that got increased. It's not necessarily means that people who are not on minimum pay that they got an increase as well. But maybe in that company they take advantage. They do the same time. Yeah. I mean, I think the benefit of you having it documented is that you have it on the file. and you know it happened. But as I say, it should definitely be showing on the payslips anyway.
What about salaried workers? How is the minimum wage worked out? We have a number of staff who get a lot of weeks of study leave or professional exams. Does this count towards minimum wage?
So they're not paid on exam leave, are they? I don't know. Are they getting pay? But they should still be getting. So it means that whether they're part-time, full-time, whatever, that their hourly rate, so you could be on a salary, you could be working 37.5 hours a week if that's what you're contracted to do. Then you divide that into your salary and you look at what your hourly rate is. Yeah.
And I'm just going to finish up with this because there's a number of questions on this. Is we have employees in other countries. Should they be included in the gender pay gap? Does that bring us
This
past
for
the
Ireland?
number?
Yeah,
just
this is
for
for Ireland.
So if I've only got 20 people in Ireland, 50 people in the UK,
yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah. So the thing is, other countries will have their own gender pay reporting as well. Yeah.
So I'm going to leave it there for the minute. We still have
Right.
lots of questions, but it's just gone 12 o'clock. And Fredericka will give you some time off.
Thank you very much.
Of water or something.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for taking the time. Nikki will send all the information out, and as well as with all Fredericka's details as well. Fredericka, you have just been wonderful, and thank you for taking so many questions from everybody. And we could be here for another hour, so we'll have to cut it at some point. But all Fredericka's details will go along with the email, Voltedge HR, if anybody wants to look at the website or contact Fredericka directly. I couldn't recommend Fredericka more. Lovely. Thanks, Fredericka, for a fantastic webinar.
Thank you so much.
Have
a lovely day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yes, so thank you so much, everybody, and we'll talk to you all soon. Take care.
Bye.